enough quad tuning conversations to tell you why tuning your drum 4 to a B is the superior choice, we're still going to let Tomas and Adam have their moment.
But in all seriousness, between the two of them, they have decades of WGI and DCI experience, a couple Sanfords, and they have had the honor of teaching on nearly every continent.
As they've gotten older and more experienced, they've transitioned from being the cool uncles to the line to now the quad dads. Tomas and Adam make the world a better place 4 to 5 quad drummers at a time.
We are incredibly proud of their dedication to us and their students on a daily basis.
They are masters of their craft, and we're super excited for you to experience their clinic entitled The Rules of Quad Drumming and When to Break Them.
So without further ado, please welcome to the stage Adam Norris,
Tomas Claesen, and the 2025 Rhythm X Quadline.
Hi everyone, I'm Tomas, that's Adam, and on stage we're super excited to bring back the 2025 Rhythm X Quadline. From left to right, we got Mr. Will Lynch from Avon, Indiana. Mr. Ty Slaugenhoup from Morgantown, West Virginia. Mr. Aidan Eames from Tulsa, Oklahoma. And last but not least, Mr. Leo Bergin, the fourth, from St. Louis, Missouri.
Now, the title of the presentation is The Rules of Quad Drumming and When to Break Them. And to do that, we're going to examine this through 3 different lenses. So the first is going to be mechanics. The second one is going to be finding excellence. And then the last is going to be building consistency. But before we go any further, let's hear from the guys.
So let's start with mechanics. When you talk about learning the rules and when to break them, this is really a quote that inspired us. Learn the rules like a pro so you can break them like an artist, which is a Pablo Picasso quote. So that means let's talk about the rules first. Quick crash course in the rules of quad drumming. Let's go to tacit real quick. So posture, you probably know a lot of this already, but something that kind of characterizes our look is kind of have a strong chest, relaxed shoulders combo. And that comes from, do this with me real quick, everyone. Put out your hand. You're kind of over drum 1. Go out to drum 3. Now go to the other side across your body. Did you just feel your pecs engage, like as you cross the midline right there? That's where that kind of typical quad drummer look comes from. Next, we have the grip. We're a little more French in our grip. So very quick overview of that. We have German, where it's super flat. And then we have French, the other extreme, with the thumb on top. And in between that, we call, it's formerly known as American grip, but we call it Belgian grip. And the reason why is that if you look at a world map between Germany and France, is the country of Belgium, not America. And the reason we do that is it's a quad drummer thing. So if you think about drawing a triangle from the bead of the stick to the fulcrum point, the connection point, and then connecting those where they would, then that's a pretty big triangle in German grip. And the thing with that is, if you're crossing over, it feels like you have to cross over that entire triangle, that entire surface. And so if you just roll over the hand a little bit, and we'll talk about rolling in a second here, you just make that triangle a lot smaller, and it just helps you get out of your own way as you're navigating the quads. Some playing rules. A lot of the classic rules are in place to facilitate sounding great. We can relax, guys. Thank you. So first of all, you got to play in the right zones. And traditionally, we have these zones. We probably adhere a little more to the middle and the right. Some groups define a very strict like left and right-hand zone. We typically don't, but they each have their purpose, right? Then actual playing technique, a lot of it revolves around protecting the y-axis. So the vertical axis, that's like playing snare drum or really any other percussion instrument. The good technique you set up there, you want to protect as you move around. And so you want to keep, so that's the x-axis. And that was first laid out by Bill Bachman in his seminal work, awesome book, Quad Logic, sorry. Sorry, Bill. Anyway, there he is, yes. So, super influential work on probably all of us here and a lot of us in the room. And so the point is that you protect that as you move around. And so you move from the forearm, from the elbow down, and you don't use the wrist to create lateral motion. The last point in classic quad technique, scrapes, by the way, ultimately, ideally, that's exactly what scrapes are too, just windshield wiper motion applied. The last point, let's get our sticks real quick to demonstrate this, is how you cross over. Let's start with kind of the easiest one, a 4 and 3 cross. This is what we call a wrist or arm cross. And it's the most comfortable one because both hands can just easily play the way they would normally play and there's no restrictions. You have a lot of clearance, right? Now let's go to 3 and 2. So it gets more narrow here, and if you do it the kind of bad way on purpose, what it creates is this super steep angle, and that's not going to sound very good. So we want to avoid that, and the fix is by pushing out a little bit and getting a little more French, especially in the top hand. Yep. Let's go to 2 and 1 next. The kind of normal technique here is called the thumb or stick cross. So barely any body parts or none actually overlap here. This is great, super comfortable, doesn't require a lot of energy to get in and out of it. It gets written a lot for that reason. The only exception here is that underhand, if it has to play an accent, it can't do it. So the fix is the same thing, still on those zones. You're going to just push out, get a little more French, and now you have that underhand clearance to play a great sounding notes.
Now, part of the question is, why do we break these rules? Well, those are some great examples. But a better question is, why do we have some of these rules in the first place? I think rules are great for this kind of stuff. They're especially great for people with inexperience or beginners or things like that. It gives some really concrete starting points and stopping points that put what you're doing a little bit more on rails. But what we try to focus on at this level is what we can remove. All the restrictions that we place on ourselves that are maybe really true for a young student aren't as true as you get into some more advanced skill sets. So we try to focus on what restrictions that we can move. You got to start somewhere with the rules, but you want to try to remove those restrictions as much as you can so that they can flow around the drums a little bit easier. One of the ways that we do that is through the playing zones.
Yep. So we kind of have these charts, but let's talk about scrapes. You start making exceptions here, and people will refer to these as scrape zones, and they're great. But they mainly apply for really fast scrapes, and we'll play some of those for you in a minute here. But as you get slower, that doesn't feel so good, so you want to kind of draw it out a little bit, so maybe more towards the center or even the right there. But then there's another rule that if it's a triple beat scrape, you actually want to do the bottom chart and even out those zones. And so it's easy to kind of lose the forest for the trees a little bit in all of these rules. And so really what we talk about a lot is that the full donut is acceptable. And if the drums are tuned right, then this whole circle, everything that's yellow, should sound good if that's where you need to go for that part.
And we use that to facilitate whatever we're trying to do. There's so many, like Tomas was saying, so many competing principles with what we're playing at any given time, and those skill sets move so fluidly between each other that to try to get married to just one specific way, this isn't really conducive to the stuff that we're playing, especially at the upper echelons of the skill sets that we're trying to do. So another thing that we do is to manipulate not only where we're playing on the drum, but also kind of how we move our hands. So we'll talk a few things. Everybody put your hands out like this. We use a lot of flight analogies. So if this was a plane, I could take the nose and I could pitch the nose up and down. That's controlling that y-axis motion. That's what we do here to play. We also have the roll. So that's I'm rolling my hands inside and out, and that controls the German versus French versus Belgian versus Australian if you go all the way. But either way, those are the ones. But the last one that we use is called the yaw. So the nose can kind of point either direction, and that's another way that we try to break the rules. It's really only when it's necessary. We try not to do that because that can really affect the sound quality in a lot of circumstances. But there are some instances where you need a really quick motion, and it's just not very efficient to move the whole playing zone or the whole arm side to side. So combining that donut approach with that quick lateral motion that we can do allows us a much more versatile range that we can do.
I want to jump in real quick about the yaw motion. So the classic quad technique is you want to make sure the pathway of the stick is vertical. If velocity is speed plus direction, that's the direction part. That's just what's going to create the best, typically most sound, right? So as we move around, that's why X and Y exists in the first place. The yaw kind of changes that trajectory a little bit, so you lose some sound, and that's why we typically don't want to do that. But like Adam was saying, well, sometimes you can play some really cool parts that way, and if it's a feature moment, we can do the yaw.
And so we see that in a couple things. So the first thing that we played is an exercise that we'll do kind of in lieu of eights, especially if we've already kind of been going for the day. We don't need to warm up as many muscles. We just need the hands to get going again. But we're going to play that exercise again in just a moment. You'll see as that one goes through the variations that we start to incorporate more of these rule breaks. We're also going to do another exercise, just our triplet roll exercise. And both of them are structured in a way that we try to do not maybe the most flashy rounds or anything like that for our warm-ups, but stuff that's really representative of more what we're going to play in the show more frequently. So we kind of get more bang for our buck in that way. So we'll do that first exercise again, and then we'll do triplet rolls.
So at the top, yep. So at the top of that, hopefully you saw a little bit of that yaw motion, which is definitely with intent. So here's triple roll timing.
So the next section that we're going to talk about is finding excellence. How do we take things that are good and make them great? How do we find the upper echelon of what we can do? And the sort of traditional wisdom for that is, okay, I got my music, I got my drill, and now I'm just going to rep it into the ground, and hopefully it's better in 3 months when you get to state finals or whatever. But reps are not the only tool to find success. And if you were a painter, you wouldn't want to paint with just 1 or 2 colors. You want to try to paint with as many as you can. So reps aren't the only way that we can find some success. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is set up the pieces on the board to have the highest possible ceiling so that whatever we're able to do at the end of the season, we get the most that we possibly can out of it. To do that, let's play the quad break from last season. This is letter L.
So this is, if you were lucky enough to get a handout, this is on the sheet music right there, movement 2 quad break. All right, so how do you find excellence? Let's actually talk about some more traditional ways first before Adam will talk about our unconventional ways. So if you want to sound great, then you need to tune the drums. We typically do it for the students. Sometimes they tune themselves. We don't want to get super in-depth about tuning here, but if you are interested in learning more, tomorrow in the Pearl demo room, room 210, I believe, at 1 p.m., we will be back on stage, and I'll get really in-depth about tuning right there. But so, real quick today, just to leave you with some info. We tune the drums to pitches, and the reason we do that is for consistency, day to day, week to week, indoor, outdoor, but also instructor to instructor. You know, this is just what we agree on. And we'll change it, you know, year to year. There's an Instagram post Rhythm X Quads put out about this, like, through the years. But anyways, this is our standard. B on drum 4, D, E, and then G sharp. And as you decide this, you know, for your program, you might want a different tuning scheme. Just something important to keep in mind is that you want to fill out the mid-range of frequencies, with the basses being the low frequencies, snares are the high frequencies, and quads has got to fit in the middle so you can actually hear them. Then the next thing, so besides tuning, is cleaning the rhythms, obviously. One tool there is just playing stuff on drum 2. It's a thing we always do. Sometimes it catches auditionees off guard when we ask them to do that. To really just lock in the rhythms and not have to worry about any of the around stuff. And as we do that, 2 additional tools we'll do is that we, as the instructors, will just play the part on the students' drum 2 while they're locking in the rhythms with us, you know, and playing clean with us. And there's something stationary to lock into. Another tool is we'll all start on drum 2 and we'll split it A, B, A, B. A's now play the around, then switch, or add in the around one at a time. You know, kind of pick your own adventure with that. But that's a super important one. That's vertical alignment. Then, of course, the other part is balancing the sound. So this is both player to player. And actually, pro tip, if Ty is the listening point and you hear Leo overplaying, he might just be overplaying, but it might also be that Aidan is underplaying a little. This quad spot right here, with 5, it would be the same thing. It's easy to get away with underplaying, and that's just something to troubleshoot, like as you're trying to troubleshoot balance in your ensemble.
How we break the rules. So balance is a number of things. Balance within the ensemble doesn't necessarily mean that we're all playing at the exact same height. So playing a 12-inch note on a drum 4 or a 6-inch drum is not the same as playing it on bottom bass or on a snare drum. It's not always the same volume. So the first thing is that we have to kind of separate height and volume. Those are not necessarily synonymous to each other. The second thing is how we get around the drums. We use the aggregate velocity. So aggregate meaning all of the velocity, which includes the lateral motion. So we're going to play this chunk again in the second that we just played. But what you'll see is how quickly they have to move, not only because it's a fast tempo, but also because they're moving very quickly side to side. Because of that, that lateral velocity kind of counts towards how fast the stick is impacting the head. So one of the things we joke about is we call it the science graph. And it's basically that the faster that the stick is already moving, the less that the player has to really put in because you're already moving that fast. So if they tried to play the end of this chunk and really tried to muscle everything out, they might achieve whatever arbitrary height that we've assigned to them, but is it really going to sound good? Probably not, and it's going to be really difficult. So we can relax that, remove that restriction, and let that motion go. So we want to try to see balance a little more holistically than just, are we all playing at the same height? You don't see balance, you hear balance. You know what I mean? So you want to make sure that you're using your ears to find that distinction. So with all that in mind, let's hear that same chunk again and see it maybe through a new lens. Here we go. This is, again, the movement 2 quad break, letter L.
So one last thing before we play the next chunk, and we'll then dissect it, is in this chunk, we changed some arounds in there, and we repped it and did the drum 2 reps and talked about aggregate velocity. there was still a part that wasn't quite cutting. And finally, what we realized is the fix was in the drill. It was a facing issue. So we were doing this part, going from side 1 to side 2, and kind of where we cross over and back under, and then backed up. Like right there, we lost the quads. And so what ended up being the fix was just to put them at a 45-degree angle, because we were so far over that the sound wasn't quite projecting to the box. And so sometimes those fixes are design fixes. They're not really like member execution. So the next chunk we're going to play is letter Y. You have part of this in the handout. You'll recognize it on the fake flams and the 4 big quarter notes on drum 4. This is from the end of movement 2 right here. So letter Y, you can see there's 2 versions in the handout. One is the original and one is the finals version. This is also, if you are a percussive notes reader, the one we published is about this very chunk. So the original music has a triplet roll. Most of it got preserved. And we did all our homework, you know, and one of the things we actually talked about on rolls is the following concept. It's the concept of compensating. So imagine, you might not be a quad drummer, but imagine a drum set example. Imagine playing a roll on the hi-hat, double stroke roll, versus a roll on the floor tom. The hi-hat is kind of a lot less work, easier, right? And you need just adjustments on the floor tom and the fulcrum and finger support, maybe a little more wrist depending on the tempo and so on. To an extent, that's what it is like to play on the Spox versus the drum 4. So as you play rolls that move around the drums, you need to make those micro adjustments in the grip. And so that's an advanced quad drummer skill. But even when we did that, it still wasn't quite working. Okay, so when that happens, what do? We look at the voicings first. Might be our voicings, might be other voicings in the ensemble. Sometimes we remove a scrape. Sometimes we add a scrape. Sometimes adding one actually makes the part easier.
So the biggest thing, too, is that not everything has to be the hardest thing. So we try to look at it through kind of a risk versus reward. And we really want to pick our battles. So that chunk that they played before, the letter L, the movement 2 feature, that was like the feature moment for the section in the show. We want high risk right there because we're going to get high reward. A moment like this is a full battery moment. The quads playing the craziest thing you've ever seen is really high risk that's not really going to net us anything. So we're trying to, again, balance and pick our battles. The other thing is, again, not everything has to be the hardest thing that you've ever played. And being flashy is great for featured, but that's not a feature. So the question that we ask is, does it need to be removed or does it just need to be modified? So like we said, the original version of that was really complicated, had a lot of extra motion, and we said this just is not speaking at all, so we need to kind of simplify that. And it might be a combination of factors. We try to look at our quad voicing and say, okay, this roll, we're playing the right height, we're playing the right volume, we're playing the right rhythm person to person, but it's still not coming across, and maybe it's because the quads are changing drums, you know, every note, they're all over the place, and it's just not really cutting with the other ensemble. So we simplify the frequencies that are moving, and we change those variables kind of one at a time. Traditional wisdom is take the quads out if it doesn't sound good. Oh, snares sound bad, take out the quads. That's like kind of the classic, you know what I mean? But we can maybe scale that down. That might still ultimately be the answer, but it doesn't have to be the first answer. And as we're doing this, I think the biggest factor is that we want the audience to hear what's on the page rather than feeling like we're doing everything on the page. So as we're coming down the drums, you know, the drums are getting louder as they get bigger. So as I'm coming down the drums, it's naturally going to get louder, even if I as a player don't do anything. So we can use that to our advantage. There might be a written crescendo, but we tell them, just play it flat. And the difference between the drums sizes is going to be plenty to get the effect that we want. There's something in there that moves from one of the Spock drums over to drum 2 that's written as a crescendo, but that's a big jump in volume even if they don't do anything in their hands. So actually what we found was when we tried to play the crescendo, it was way too loud. So we have to kind of calibrate the input that they're doing so that the audience gets the effect that we want them to hear, which aren't necessarily the same thing. So let's do that same chunk again. Now we have a better understanding of why this letter Y ended up the way it was, so let's hear it one more time.
So now that we've talked about the mechanics and we've raised the ceiling, we've combed through the parts and decide on, okay, we like where this is headed, it's time to make sure that things are always great. And we want to make sure in this phase of the season, kind of the last part, that we absolutely reach our potential. Especially that we're very fortunate to teach at a group like Rhythm X, and the talented students we get, we want to set them up for success. So at this point, there's actually a big responsibility with you as the instructor on instructional design. You got to decide, what do these performers need? How are you going to break it down or set them up for success? And how many reps are you going to give them on that? Of course, you need enough reps. There's just no substitute for doing it over and over again. But more reps doesn't automatically mean more success, and you got to be careful with over-repping things.
Yeah, so we do a few things. The first thing we do is we try to actually spend, quad players in here are going to hate this, but we spend a lot of time in subs wearing the drums to simulate what it's actually going to be like in performance. Okay, thanks, Bill. Yeah, so he's into it. So that's one of the things we do. Obviously, for WGI, there's a lot of choreography that's involved, and it's really hard. We can really work on the rhythms, but when you start adding in, putting them on roller skates and doing backflips, it's very much a different experience to play with. So we try to focus on, what do they need for success. We also still focus just as hard at the end of the season on basic fundamental skills. People ask all the time, what do you guys work on when you have students that are really talented, whatever? You'd be surprised how many times we say, hey, listen back. Hey, stop playing so loud. Why are you playing too fast? Things like that, like really, really basic stuff. Pick your feet up, stand up straight. All the normal stuff that anybody here has said to 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th grade students all the way up through the top of world class. So we start to focus on all that as well. One of the things that we like is a quote that says, there's no advanced skills. There are only advanced scenarios that require the application of strong fundamental skills. And that's what we try to live by, is how do we apply that so all the way up the chain through the most extended stuff that we're playing, that the fundamentals of what we're doing still hold up. So let's listen to another chunk of the show. This is the double C closer quad break. We're going to hear this, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more. This is one of the chunks that we worked on a lot throughout the season.
So this lick, first of all, we love. Secondly, it's an example of where we actually made the part harder throughout the season. The last bar wasn't always that, and it just wasn't quite hitting, and so we ended up playing those big scrapes at the end. But even when we did that, we looked at each other in rehearsal, must have been early April, and it's like, that lick, it's always like an 8 out of 10. And 8 out of 10 is not what we go for. And so one of our favorite tools to get something where it's like, well, the members kind of know what to do, but we're getting this output, is primers. And a primer is taking a part and then breaking it down to a way more fundamental skill, like finding a great starting point and making it easy, like to where you can't mess it up. And then through reps, you add on layers back to where you're back to the original part with a better understanding, right? And so this is, again, where you as the instructor, you have a lot of decisions to make. And a good starting point might be, let's say you're working on a roll. Like, so you got to ask, what are we bad at? So the thing that might be bad is this one roll, right? So a good starting point might be, well, play the check. Next rep, right-hand diddles only. Next rep, left-hand diddles only. Now play the full roll. But that actually might not be enough. As our colleague Russell Wharton often says, it's not the thing, It's the thing before the thing. And so on that roll, like, yeah, you might hear a bad roll, or maybe the roll is always slow, but it's really the eighth notes before. And maybe they're not that bad, but it's just this snowballing effect. And you really got to fix the earlier problem first. And honestly, half the time when you fix the eighth notes, the roll takes care of itself, you know. So that could be a good starting point. For this lick, that wasn't super relevant. For us, what we needed to start on is kind of in the middle of bar 3. So this is another rule breaker. We don't always go 1 bar, 2 bars, 4, and now the full 8. You know, you can just start in the middle. And often you need to work on transitions. And those transitions don't often land on bar lines, right? So here in this sheet music, and we're about to demonstrate this for you, we start on a count 3, but treat it as count 1. One of the checkpoints is an upbeat, because we had eighth notes going into a fast single stroke 7. And so don't be afraid. Like, no bar lines are safe when we're doing this, right? And then lastly on this is we do a lot of primers throughout the season. It's kind of ad hoc exercises that you make up, and it might be for a skill set, it might be for the book. But for us, this is a tool we often use late in the season to really take it from good to great. And so this primer you're about to see, we did all of finals week in rehearsal every morning, but also in the lot. Finish the roll. Add the eighth notes. Finish the bar. Add a bar. Add the 16ths. Finish it out. More.
Aren't they great? They're great. You guys can chill for a second. Okay, so one of the things that we use this for is because we want to try to embody the concept of high reps, low pressure. We want to be able to work on stuff that we need to work on in an environment that lets them just focus on that. We say a phrase, and maybe it's a little crass, we always say, you just need to be dumber. You need to be a dumb quad drummer and just go and not think. And we want to try to remove all the variables that they have to think about so that all of that kind of becomes second nature and becomes automatic. You know, we start with small chunks like that, and we try to be really purposeful about where we start so that we can build onto it in a way that makes sense and doesn't get too much too fast. You know, you don't see Tom Brady when he was playing, he didn't come out there and, all right, first pass of the day, 70-yard pass to warm up. Like, we're not going to do that. So we want to start with a smaller chunk so we can get in there a little bit more. Part of that, too, is when we do that process, we don't give a lot of comments. And that's one, so that there's less pressure and less stuff that they're thinking about, but also just to let them work it out in their hands a little bit so that we get more meaningful reps. If you gave us a counter of all the kind of typical comments that we say over the course of the season, the number one comment, far and away, by a significant margin, would be just do it again. No, no extra thinking, no other stuff to think about. Because if we're every single rep, there how many different versions of that primer that we've gone through, and if between every single one we're inserting, don't be too fast, don't be too slow, don't be too loud, it turns your brain into spaghetti. You know what I mean? There's just not a lot of thinking that you can do. So it lets it be a little bit more automatic. It gives us also a better opportunity to diagnose what the issues actually are. You know, you listen to 10 reps in a row, you might find 10 different things to talk about. But what we really want to find is the one thing that we could talk about every single rep. And that's what we're trying to diagnose when we do that. So it gives them a chance to play it a whole bunch of times without a lot of pressure. It gives us a chance to diagnose what do we actually need to work on, and that will maximize our chance of success by the end.
And the beauty of primers, if you were listening closely, you may have actually witnessed this, is that the students get opportunities to fix things themselves. And typically it'll clean up, or even if the primer wasn't the cleanest thing ever, it will pay off at the end. And so part of being a dumb quad drummer is also us calling the chunks. We just did it twice each today, but in the moment, sometimes it just needs a third rep, you know, and so we take that pressure off the quads as well. And so really reps and more reps, an analogy we like to think of is that doing a rep is collecting a marble. Every rep of the season is a marble in your bag. And the good reps are green marbles, and the bad reps are red marbles. And when it's time to perform, what you're doing is you're pulling out one marble. And so what are the odds that that marble is going to be green, right? And so a good rep, that's another thing, is just do it again to just collect more green marbles. And so by the end of the season, you just know it's going to be green what you pull out because you are just cashing in on the investment that you've made all season. And I was going to say, by the end, I think this was an absolute 10 out of 10, like especially semis and finals.
Yeah. And because of that process, that was not a coincidence. It wasn't like we kind of rolled the dice and hoped for the best. We set up a system in place, and then we were able to really cash in on that at the end of the season and have some really great reps of that. So all of that in mind, let's hear that lick one more time, just the whole lick. We'll do all of double C.
I think we have time for twice, looking at the clock.
Yeah, let's do it twice. So the big thing is we establish rules for a reason. There's rules that are in place that we play that have been tested over a long period of time by so many people, and that's why those things become the rules that we have. But we also break rules for a reason. We want to make sure that we're setting ourselves up so that the ensemble can perform at its absolute highest capacity. That's ultimately the number one goal. There's not an official right way or wrong way to do those things. This is just the way that we like to do it and bend and break those rules to help. We try to see that as a vehicle to achieve what we want. So where can we remove those restrictions? Where can we bend and break the rules so that we can advance and get better success day in and day out so that, again, like we said with that lick, it's not a coincidence that it's executed really well at the end of the season. That lets us, each group is different every year. Like this group is great. 2024, totally different set of people, totally different set of things that we needed to go through. This coming year is going to be a new example of that. And it's true for every year, every time. So when we view it through this lens, again, that allows us to customize it to what the group needs, and we don't just hope that they fit into this sort of, I'm going to do it this way every single time. So this gives us a little bit more of a systematic approach in how we diagnose errors, how we advance things, and like we said, just set the capacity up for the highest possible success. So we encourage you guys, hopefully you learned some new tools to do that today, but we encourage you to experiment with your ensembles and see what works and see what doesn't. A lot of this stuff comes with experience. We've been doing this for a really long time, and we have been bad at it also before. So you have to go through that process as a performer and as an educator. So don't be afraid to try some new things. This is always evolving.
So before we let you go, just a few quick thanks. Tim Jackson, who writes all the beats, and the rest of the design team, and all the amazing people that we get to teach with season after season. Devin Bergman and the Rhythm X board of directors. Abby Hermish, who is fantastic, and the rest of the Rhythm X admin team, who makes what we do even possible at all. And then Brandon Wood, where is Brandon? All the way in the back, for filming us today. Let's give him a round of applause right now. Brandon and Benji and the rest of our media team who capture all of these core memories that we build season after season.
We also, before we go any further, want to thank our 2025 quad line. Let's give them a hand. Take another bow. Take another bow. Here we go. Take another bow. I personally want to thank my wife, Sarah Norris. She's over there. I also want to thank my dog for letting me. She's on the left. That's my dog, Margot.
And I want to thank my wife, Chelsea Levine, and our dog, Rachel, who's also at home.
We also want to give a shout out and thanks to the Rhythm X sponsors, Evans Drumheads, ProMark Drumsticks, and Pearl Drums. And let's talk about some things we're excited about. We're really excited about Rhythm X 2026. We're already going, the season's already underway. We're very excited to see what we're able to come up with and present for you guys down the road.
We're also super excited to see what's next for these four, whether it be go back to college, teach drumline, or really any other endeavor they're on and where they get to apply a lot of the lessons that they learned in drumline.
Now, one special shout out I want to give, and you might have seen this already, is that Tomas here has a book that just came out called Quadlingual. I would like to be the first to give it a stamp of approval and say you should go get it. So it should be available at quadlingual.com, or it should be here at the Steve Weiss booth if it's not sold out already, which I heard it might be. So get it while you can.
Sweet. If you have any questions, we'll be around for a bit. We're going to take some pictures real quick first. If you have any additional questions, come find us, or find us on Instagram. On the handout, we also have email addresses listed for Adam and me. Again, I'll be back with these four tomorrow in the Pearl demo room and answer all your tuning questions, which I'm sure you have. But that's it. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
All right.
I'm going to go give you a hug.
Yeah, man.
Love you, dude.
Love you too, buddy.